time was wasted in assembling a squad. This pitchfork army on a mission sent from God. No witch was saved from Reverend Paris's brigade. Their crusade, their crusade, their crusade. Call the magistrate and don't you wait another minute, cause this town is going to hell if we don't put away the sinning. And we got no time to let a jury have their turn. Let 'em burn, let 'em burn, let 'em burn. The damned were crammed into a carriage on the square. Their faces battered and their bodies all were bare. The Reverend led them to an isolated hill. Time to kill, time to kill, time to kill. One by one their necks were snapped beneath the cedar tree. The spirits vanished and the demons all were free. They dug a hole to hold the devilish remains. They were slain, they were slain, they were slain. The town was safe from all those wicked dissidents. They could continue with their life of innocence, dispensing justice from a higher power. They built a church atop the spirits and the bones. Their moans were heard as they were laying down the stones. But the witches got revenge beneath that steeple bell. They cast a spell, sent the Reverend to hell. No time was wasted in assembling a squad. This pitchfork army on a mission sent from God. No witch was saved from Reverend Paris's brigade. Their crusade, their crusade, their crusade. Call the magistrate and don't you wait another minute, cause this town is going to hell if we don't put away the sinning. And we got no time to let a jury have their turn.
What's up, Internet? It me. Hi. So we are back with our DM chats, and it me this week. And I'm going to be talking about kind of some issues from a player perspective. And pretty much all of these are things that I have done. So mainly calling myself out here. And then I also got some suggestions from a couple of really awesome people. So thank you, Uncaged Anthology Discord group. So yeah, first off, there is no River of Terrycell this weekend. So what we have instead is Susie is actually going to do a live stream of Neverwinter Nights and sort of run around in Barovia in video game form. So it should be fun, something a little different, something a little, not rolling of dice, but still the D&D related. So it should be a lot of fun. I think it'll be a nice sort of chill morning stream. It'll still be at the same time as usual, so 10 a.m. Eastern Standard Time, so it should be a good time all around. The cats are out, so apologize if there's any weird hanking or meowing or weird noises or whatever's happening on cue. So, and if any of our subscribers are in the chat, you have a special cat emote that you can use if you'd like to do that whenever you see or hear a cat hank. So today I wanted to talk a little bit about player problems. So these are what I'm mainly going to be talking about, and the disclaimer that I do in front of all of these is what works at your table, and as long as everyone is on the same page and is enjoying the game you're playing, cool, you're doing D&D right. So I'm going to talk about the things that happen at a table that I've been guilty of doing as a player that I think are a problem at the table and that hinder other people's enjoyment, so to speak. So number one is one that is really a problem more and more and more, and that is being on your phone or tablet or laptop, being on some kind of other device. And this becomes more and more complicated as more and more people use things like D&D Beyond, which are great and really helpful, but they also mean you have to be connected to the internet to use them, and that is a whole dangerous bag of cats. And it's also really, I know for us when we stream, it's really challenging because we have the streams going on a lot of our mobile devices and are kind of trying to keep an eye on chat too. So it's really difficult to manage if you're doing something like that. What I am particularly talking about is things that I know I have caught myself doing, which is really horrifying because I go back and watch the streams so I can see when I'm doing it, is when I'm just doing this for an hour solid and I'm not engaging with the game, I'm not playing the game, I'm not participating, and when it finally comes time that someone grabs my attention or says, Verity, what are you doing? And I have to then go, wait, what happened? What are we doing? Where are we? And it completely derails what's been going on in the game. It annoys everybody else around the table. It's frustrating for the DM to have to reiterate what has been happening. It's just kind of disrespectful to everyone else at the table as well. So, if you can manage it, keep your device only on what you need. So I have 2 devices that I tend to have out during Tales from Cyril, and I have one that I tend to have out during River of Turisal. During River of Turisal, I usually have my phone, and it is strictly on the chat and the stream, and that way I can just sort of glance over, make sure everything's running okay, and continue on without getting sucked in. For Cyril, I sometimes have my iPad and my phone. If I have both of those, usually what I'm doing is I have a character sheet open on D&D Beyond on my tablet, because I like the bigger size to be able to read things a little bit easier. And then I have the chat on my phone, or if I only have one device out, I have my tablet and I have it on the stream. What I have found works best for me is to have a paper character sheet, and to have my spell cards and those in a plastic sleeve so that I can actually just use dry erase markers to mark off my spell slots that way. And that removes the temptation of the internet, because the internet is super tempting. And it is really difficult line to manage, especially if you are somebody who is streaming your game, or who is, trying to tweet out the ridiculously funny things that your characters are doing, because let's be real, like, the games are usually pretty funny and you want to share that stuff on Twitter, and I totally get it, and I think you can. I think it's just important that once you've done whatever it is you're doing online, to get off and back into the game. And that for me has been an issue that I work on, and that's why I have switched. If you've watched Cyril for a while, you'll notice that I switched from mainly using like my iPad for Verity to mainly using my binder for Verity. And that is because I am weak as shit and don't have very good self-control sometimes. So I tried to remove the temptation as much as possible. Yeah, so that's number one. That's an issue that I know that I've had a lot of trouble with. And that ties in to a lot of other things as well, which I suppose this could overarching be just called not paying attention. And that could mean that you and your buddy beside you are having a separate conversation about Avengers Endgame or Game of Thrones or that jerk at work. And you two are having a separate conversation while the rest of the group is playing the game. And that gets really distracting because then there's multiple conversations happening that people are hearing bits and pieces of, and it's really overwhelming. Like, for somebody like me who has sensory issues anyways, it can be really overwhelming to have multiple conversations happening around me at the same time because I can't focus on any one because something else is happening in an adjacent space. So be aware of that and try and keep those conversations to break or before or after game, and don't have a separate conversation without the rest of the group being involved, especially if it's stuff that's out of game discussion. And that's especially true during combat. I know combat can sometimes take forever to get to your turn, especially if there are a lot of enemies, if there are a lot of people and things that have to go and have to happen, and it can maybe be 5 or 10 minutes before it's your turn to do something. And it's really easy to pull out your phone and just, I'm going to check Facebook real quick, there's nothing really going on for me, or I'm going to just completely space out for a few minutes. You know, you can do like Bran and I've got to go now, and just completely space out, be gone somewhere else. And then when it finally becomes your turn, you say, oh, well, I'm going to attack that gnoll. And everyone goes, the gnoll is dead. And the gnoll's been dead for 3 other people's turns. And you just haven't been paying attention. So then you don't know what your character wants to or needs to do. So then you take 2 to 3 minutes figuring out what your character is going to do, where they're going to move, what they're going to do, yada yada. It delays the game for everybody. So I think it's really important, especially in combat, to try and maintain your focus on what is happening, especially if you're a character that has a reaction. Like, if you are a spellcaster who can do counterspell, you should be paying attention in every combat situation for sure. Because who knows when a wizard's about to fireball the group and you could have potentially stopped it, but you were on Facebook or checked out. You know, it happens. Nobody's perfect, and maintaining solid concentration for 5 hours is not something humans are really good at. So understand that it will happen, but get to the point where you can catch yourself when you're doing it and snap back. And I know, like, for me, I have really struggled with enjoying... Yes, Brian. I will. But I really have struggled with combat and finding a way to enjoy it. So it is really hard for me to not space out during combat. But I'm trying to do better at it. And part of that is by forcing myself to just have paper sheets. And then it's a lot more entertaining to watch what's going on in the rest of the group than it is to stare at my paper sheet. So, stop cooing at the cat.
I didn't think it was that loud.
Yep. So yeah, that's probably like the number one thing I would say are a lot of players' problems, me included for sure, is absolutely not paying attention and derailing the game because you're not focused on what's happening, and then you're forcing the rest of the group to continuously backtrack to try and explain to you what you missed when you were spacing out or on Facebook or on Twitter or whatever it was that you were doing. Like, a lot of times I don't even know what it was I was doing on my phone. Like, I have absolutely no idea where that hour went. It just was gone. So just try and be mindful of it and pay attention. Everybody's committing a lot of time, so focus the best you can, and do what you can. If you need a break, ask for one. You know, most everybody is going to need breaks during D&D because, like I said, people focusing for 4, 5, 6 hours uninterrupted is not really in human nature necessarily. So, you know, be mindful of that. So, another thing is not sharing the spotlight or trying to be... Hi! What is... Oh, hello, the Caustic Kobold. That's an awesome name. So another thing that I have an issue with as a player is not sharing the spotlight. And we talked about this a little bit when I went over the player types and talked about how I was an actor type. And that means that I tend to talk a lot in the games and occasionally probably overstep where I should be. So I think it's important to be mindful of your character and who you're playing with. Like, for instance, if my rogue, who has a -1 strength mod, is constantly shoving aside the paladin in order to do strength-based things, I mean, yeah, it might be a little bit funny, but it's going to be annoying for the paladin player because that's sort of what that should be their moment to shine, not necessarily the super squishy -1 strength who couldn't climb up a mountain for like 8 minutes in the very first session we ever played in Zero. Deep shame forever on that moment. But be aware of what your fellow players, where they shine, and give them those chances to shine and to have their moment. So, you know, if something is happening that is connected to one of your fellow players, you know, their backstory or their history, let them have the moment to ask questions and don't always just go, well, I'm going to leave and go walk outside and yada yada. Don't let them have their moment. And, like, for me, that is shutting up and letting other people ask questions, because they may have a bunch of questions that are also really relevant and should be asked, but if I just sit there and talk the whole time, they don't get the chance to. So make sure that you're allowing other people to speak and to have the spotlight. And in relation to that, make sure you're not talking over your fellow players. If somebody else starts to say something, don't immediately zoom in over them and not let them finish their thought. I know sometimes you get so excited that you have the most brilliant idea ever to break out of this super trapped room, and it's going to be like the greatest, most coolest thing ever, and you can't wait another second to actually share that idea. Try really hard. Because particularly... Now, I've been very fortunate in that this doesn't happen to me a lot in D&D, but I can say in real life this happens to me all the time, where I get talked over by dudes, particularly.
My phone was ringing. Somebody from Massachusetts or Michigan was calling me.
But, so be mindful of who you're talking over and if you do it a lot. I know I'm trying to do better at it in our serial game, because that really is one of my really bad habits, is that I can get really excited about what we're doing and talk over people and not let other people have their moments. So be mindful of that. And what helps me a lot of times is sometimes just literally saying mentally, don't do it out loud because then it gets distracting, but counting to myself backwards from 5 and letting myself sort of have that moment to calm down and hold on to that idea to share when the moment is appropriate and I'm not going to barrel somebody else over. And be okay if your idea isn't the one that the group uses. Sometimes your idea might have been the best one that would get you out of that situation, but it's not the one the group went with. And don't be super bitter and grumpy about that. It's a team game. Sometimes you're the leader of the group and the idea, and sometimes you're along for the ride, and that's sort of the fun of D&D, is everybody gets the chance to kind of have their moment in the spotlight. I like to think of it as sort of, you know, like in a lot of animes, so I think a lot about, like, Digimon, let's say, and in, like, some of the first seasons, every single character in there got their own episode where they got to shine, and their Digimon learned to evolve. Digivolve, sorry. Susie's giving me eyes. But yeah, it's important to let that happen. And that's one of my favorite parts of D&D, is the idea that it's sort of like this magical anime where every individual character gets an episode or an arc to shine. And so be mindful of that and try and help your other players shine. I think it's really important for you to be a fan of everybody else's character that you're playing with too, and to want them to succeed. Because then you're going to be really excited and be like, but wait, what happened? What is going on? Who is that? What? So yeah, because that's like in Cyril, we've had a couple of moments where we've learned little snippets about other people's backstories, and I'm really curious to see what happens with everyone. And looking forward to getting to that point and letting other people be characterly destroyed instead of just Verity. Caroline.
What?
She's not paying attention.
Carolyn is breaking cardinal rule number 1 right now. So that's something as well, is to make sure that you're giving other people the chance to shine and to have other people have their moments. If you have a druid in your party, let them turn into the rat and smell for something. Let them have that. That's what their character exceeds. Like, that's what their character is good at. If you have a rogue, let them sneak or look for traps. If you have a paladin, let them detect good and evil and use their paladin senses of justice. Let the characters do what they are meant to do, because that makes it a more fun game for everybody. What else? Okay. So, this one we talked a little bit about, but I would say table talking and completely derailing. So, sometimes it happens where somebody says something that's a pun and that's completely ridiculous, and the next thing you know, 45 minutes have passed, and you guys are joking still about The Little Mermaid. It can be a lot of fun, and it's one of the good things about D&D, because, feel good laughter with your friends. But if you have a set time limit with your group that is the only amount of time that you guys can play, you really should try and be respectful of that and not completely derail stuff every time the DM names the goblin Jeremy and it's the 4th Jeremy goblin that you've met. Maybe just let it slide and say something after the game and do a funny quip. It can be really detrimental sometimes, especially if it's in the middle of a villain monologue or some dramatic moment. Just, let the DM have it, just hold it in for just a second. Maybe text it to them later when they least suspect it, and then you can get them. But I think that is also important to remember, which I'm really bad at because I just start giggling and then blurt things out. So another thing for me to work on, this is just basically like a call out episode to myself. Let's be real. So a couple other things is, I know, don't roll unless you're asked to, or unless you have asked to. So don't just, go, well, that was an unsatisfying no, I'm doing it again. Oh, that's a 47 on insight check. While the DM is in the middle of actually telling you what this NPC is telling you. Let the DM finish their sentence. Again, the same rule of not cutting people off and talking over people does apply to your DM. So let them finish their sentence and then say, something to the effect of, do I believe them? I want to know, is he lying? What do I think about what she's saying? Or just, I want to do an insight check. Let the DM know before you just start throwing dice every which way. And especially if you are doing, you roll your dice for funsies, but then you happen to roll an 18 and you just hold on to that until you get something that you have to roll for, and you're like, well, I already rolled an 18. No. Again, if that works for your table and your DM's cool with it, be my guest. Do what works for your table. But in general, let the DM finish and get permission before you roll something, because it may be something that the DM is just like, oh yeah, you just know that. You didn't even have to roll, but now you have a nat 1 and you're on fire. Good job. So check in with that and see, because you just don't know. And, your DM has put in some work and is trying to make Jeremy the Goblin a compelling character for you, so let them finish Jeremy's sentence before you immediately stab Jeremy the Goblin. this one I really already kind of talked about a lot, in that I think particularly in combat is when I most frequently myself check out and see other people check out. And like I said, it can be really challenging because it could be 5, 10, 15 minutes before it's your turn to actually do something. And so it can be really easy to just, pick up your phone and scroll, and then when it comes to your fight, you have no idea what you need to do because you have no idea what enemies are left, what allies are close by, what has happened, who might be the most hurt. You don't know what you're doing, and that delays the game even further. So particularly in combat, be thinking about what you want to do well before it's your turn. And that may adjust. The wizard may say, clear the deck, fireball, and there's your answer of what you're going to do. You're running. So try and focus on combat even when it's not your turn. Because it really can get really annoying when it becomes, it's my turn, but I don't know what I want to do, so I spend 3 minutes flipping frantically through my notebook, looking over my spells, trying to figure out what I want to cast, what I want to do. Am I just going to stab it? Am I going to create bonfire? What am I going to actually do? And it wastes a lot of people's time, and then you sort of get into this vicious cycle of people not paying attention, because somebody's taking 5 minutes to decide their turn, and then the next person has to do the same thing, and so on and so forth. And so it just sort of compounds the problem into a snowball going down a hill kind of effect. And that really can make D&D really not much fun for anybody. So, pay attention. Have a plan. Improvise if you need to. Sometimes the wizard is right before you, and they just have cast something in your SOL. Okay, that's okay. It happens sometimes in D&D. It's like in one of the last fights in Turricell. Poor Badger summoned all of these wolves to be a part of the fight, and by the time it was those wolves' turn, they were dead. They were all dead. They were all gone. And at that point, Badger had to figure out a different plan, because suddenly these 8 wolves were all gone. And it happens. But she at least was already somewhat prepared because she'd been paying attention to the combat. So it wasn't a complete shock when she looked up from her tablet or her whatever and was like, wait, why are all my wolves gone? So just try and pay attention. Be respectful of the people around you and, look at what's going on and listen. You maybe can even offer suggestions, especially if you're playing with new players. Don't be afraid to try and offer some suggestions if that works at your table. I know some tables are pretty stringent about, the metagaming idea of that. But I think for new players particularly, it can be helpful because they might not understand the repercussions of casting a fireball in the middle of the room where the whole party is. Mm-hmm. Especially if they're coming from a video game background, because friendly fire is a thing, and it's just well, it doesn't hurt anybody, and it's that's not necessarily true in D&D. So, don't tell them exactly what they should or shouldn't do, but maybe help them understand what combat-wise is happening, so they have a better idea of what they can do. And if they have questions about a spell, you can help answer, well, here's what poison does, and here's what restrained does. And that can be helpful, too, also, to share and to help with your other players. And don't be afraid to, so that would be the final thing, would be don't be afraid to ask other players things. It was really interesting. In our last game that was off stream, there were a couple of times where the group would say, well, let's talk about this. This is all out of game. But it was conversations that absolutely should have been happening in game. And, and we sorted that out really quickly and had the conversations in game, and it was great. Don't be afraid to do that in game. I know it can be really easy to just go, well, out of game, what do we do now? We killed the Kelpies. Where are we going? What are we doing? Why do you have to have that conversation out of game? That's what your characters should be discussing and deciding. So don't be afraid to have those conversations in the game and with the people around you. Or even ask your other players things in character. There's been times where I've had Verity say, we're going to play a game, 2 truths and a lie, and forcing everyone in the group to participate, or Brigitte sharing some of the songs of her homeland, and Ramduin talking about his siblings. Don't be afraid to ask your fellow players something. I know sometimes it can feel like the DM is the one who controls what's happening and all of that. But as a player, you also get the chance to participate and enjoy the world that is happening. D&D is my favorite when it's a collaborative thing. And so I like to participate and to talk to the other people's players and characters and, enjoy getting to know them and the world. So don't be afraid to do that. Because I think it's important. And like I said, I really think that at the end of the day, I think the DM should be the biggest fan of all of the characters that are in their game. They should absolutely be like huge fanboys and girls and fan NBs of all of the characters that they are playing with and have in their world. But you as a player, you should be fans of your friends and your fellow players' characters too, and want them to succeed and want them to have those moments where they can really shine and show what they can do. So to do that, you have to remember to step back on occasion, and that's my talk to myself. But yeah, so just to sort of recap, because I'm going to actually finish before an hour this time. Oh, that'll be like my first DM chat that hasn't gone an hour and some change. Oh, snap, I'm getting the hang of it. Maybe. And, so, 1, if you are going to use phones, tablets, laptops, whatever, be mindful of how you're using it and that you are not strictly spending the entire game on your phone. Because a lot of D&D, you don't even need your sheet. Like the last Cyril episode that we played, I needed my sheet for maybe 3 things the whole game. And so for that, you really don't need to have your computer up or your laptop up or your tablet up that entire time. And the temptation is really great if you have that to then not be paying attention at all. So be mindful of how you are using technology. And I think that's just a general life thing as technology becomes more and more prevalent. Find ways to be mindful of how you're using it so that you don't do like a me and you look up and an hour has passed and you've just been on your phone doing who knows what. Yeah, 2, pay attention, especially in combat, and I'll combine this with the later one of try and have a plan for what you are going to do when it is your turn and interact with what the other people are doing around you. I try to be as Verity as our rogue, since we have homebrewed having, God, I've completely forgotten it, when the people are on adjacent. Flanking. I try to be really cognizant of where are my allies, where's the monk, where's the cleric, and where's the paladin, because they are going to be the ones that are most likely in flanking distance for me. So I need to be aware of where they are and where they're moving, and I want to stay near the paladin because then I get bonuses to saves. So paying attention to what everyone else is doing in combat helps me keep my character alive. So focus on combat even when it's not your turn. At least as best as you can. Zoning out every once in a while is normal, but try not to do it for like 30, 45 minutes, an hour of a time, because I absolutely have done that in the past. Don't steal the spotlight from other characters. Let them have their moments to shine, especially if it's something that like a character specifically has been shown to be good at. It's like the times when I, as Verity, attempt to do a persuasion or performance role when we have our bard who his whole build is built around charisma. I shouldn't be doing that. I should step back and let the bard have that, So try and step back and let your other players have that spotlight. When it's their turn to shine, help focus the spotlight on them. Be a fan of your fellow players. Be mindful if you are talking over people. The second you notice you've done it, apologize and stop talking. And it might take some time to break that habit, but it absolutely can be done. So just pay attention to yourself and what is going on around you. That's basically what, 99% of this really is. And don't pre-roll and roll without permission. Like, please just don't be, I'm just getting all the bad rolls out. That's a 19. I'm not keeping that. That's not how that works. For most tables, if your DM allows that, that's your business. Play how you want. But it can be really annoying. Oh, and another thing, dice stacking. Try and avoid that too. Because it's also really distracting, and it is another way that you're saying, hey, I'm not really paying attention to what's going on. And of course, for people who have, like, processing issues and you need to be doing something with your hands to distract yourselves, fidget spinners, those sort of things, that's totally fine. It's just when you start getting into, like, dice stacking and playing games on your phone, you really start kind of completely zoning out of what's going on. But you know yourself the best, so do what works for you, bros. And yeah, I think that's basically it. So really, in the end, it boils down to pay attention to yourself and recognize when you are zoning out. Practice recognizing what that looks like, because you probably do it all the time, like outside of game too. So you have plenty of time to figure out when exactly you're doing it and how to recognize it and come back from it. If you're like me and the temptation of the internet is far too great and too powerful, print out a physical sheet and don't bring your electronics to the table at all. Don't do it. If you need a calculator, they still make them. I have a little crappy, like, Dollar Tree calculator that I pull out every once in a while. So, just don't do it. Don't do electronics if it's going to be an issue for you and you don't think you're going to be able to resist it, because that is absolutely a huge problem. And unless there are questions from the peanut gallery, I guess that's going to be it. So I'll give it a few to let people see if they have any questions and stuff. But, yeah, so the next couple of weeks are going to be really weird for us. We actually don't technically have another game on stream, sort of, until the 19th. So that's awkward. But we maybe are going to be doing a one-shot of some sort on the 11th, maybe. We haven't decided yet. We'll figure that out probably this weekend. Again, no River of Terrycell this weekend. Instead, we're going to have Susie running around in Neverwinter Nights, killing stuff. Neverwinter? It's just Neverwinter. Well, yeah. That's dumb.
Neverwinter Nights was a completely different game.
I know, and that's what I played. So, she'll be running around in Neverwinter. And that should be super fun. And then, yeah, we'll have a one-shot or something on the 11th. Who knows what we'll do. We're wily.
The DM needs to go home to see her mother.
So we are, so we don't actually have another campaign game until the 19th of May, which is weird. It's going to be like the longest I've gone without playing D&D in a really long time now. But yeah, we're still on with DM chat. So next week will be Carolyn with the DM chat. Going over, Druids are next? Mm-hmm. Going over the Druid class, so that should be fun. Oh, yep, brands will be left aside. But yeah, so I think that's about all that's all I've got anyways. Yeah, end of the day, most player problems can be solved by focusing and paying attention on the game. For me as a player, that's the thing that I have the hardest time with. If you need a break, ask for one, or get up and walk to the bathroom or something. You may notice I do that quite a bit in Cyril, and sometimes that's just because I need a break, and I don't want to be super distracting to everybody else because I can feel myself slipping. So if you need to do that, do that. Do it quick, come back, reset. Do what works for you. Sort yourselves out and what works for you. It's a lot of trial and error. Everybody is different because that's what makes us special. Sorry. And with that, I think that's all I got. And we'll see you. Susie will see you for sure on Sunday at 10 a.m. Eastern Standard Time for Neverwinter. And then we'll be back Wednesday for DM chats. And keep an eye on social. Oh yeah, we have a Discord channel now. by the way, so that's super fun. The link's popping up on social, so you can join us there. I'll post it in the on our Twitch channels page too, so you can find us there too. And that, I think, is it for tonight. So thanks for tuning in, and we'll be back Sunday morning for Video Games. Should be big fun. So have a good rest of the night, and I will see you all later. Bye!
Bye, Internet.